start recording now, and let's shut this down so I don't get distracted. When we look at the core cards, we begin with these cards. If you have separated, you should have some sort of page energy in front of you. Here we go back to what we talked about when we were looking at the minor arcana. We are still divided into the 4 suits, okay? We still have the wands, we still have the swords, we still have the cups and the pentacles, or a variation of that kind of energy, okay? And you will see it in your little book that comes with your deck. If you have something different, and the deck that comes to me right now is like that Halloween deck, where they have ghosts and pumpkins. And when you look at the deck and you look at the book, it says, well, you know, ghosts are supposed to be like swords and pumpkins are supposed to be pentacles in the traditional. So you will see the comparison to this traditional and you can decode it that way. But as we talked last week, the wands are the fire element. It is that inspiration, it is that spark, that motivation, what moves us, what burns like within and makes us take action. So that's what the fire element is, and it is portrayed in these wands, okay? When we look at the swords is the air element, and the air element is about intellect. It's about the mind. It's about how we think about things. And sometimes the mind plays us tricks, okay? And sometimes it's hard to keep the mind quiet, and that's why many people do meditation and many different things. But that is the element that we will see if someone is very intellectual or their mind is very prominent, okay? When we look at the cups, here is the element of the emotion, okay? The water, the flow, the heart, what's happening. And that's why when we look at these cups, we will see that a person who maybe is more dreamy and like, oh, you need to follow what your heart tells you. You need to follow this. And that's why we see the cups on that arena. And then we have the pentacles, and here is the element of earth. And it is more like the grounded person, the person that's able to say, hey, you know what? Let's be practical. Let's make it real. Let's make it physical. You know, you can dream about it. You can have an idea. You can be inspired. You can feel it. But hey, I want to touch it. I want to sense it with my 5, senses. I want to smell it, taste it, and really that's when the physical happens. So that is what the pentacles bring. If we look at those characteristics with the page energy, here is where we are marrying the energy of like a little bit of like new beginnings, very young energy. Like if I were to think about the minor arcana, I would think about, from the A's to maybe the 3, the 4, where this energy would live. If I were to think about like biological ages, I would think someone that's a teenager. This is the person that's like in the teens and young and hopeful and innocent. So that is the energy that comes up when I see a page. And sometimes we have people in our lives that have that energy. It's sort of like the Peter Pan kind of energy, if you think about it. It's like that very young spirit. If we take the page of wands, is that one that says like, hey, let's go on an adventure. Let's go discover new things. Let's be fearless. Let's like take action and go and face the world. And And sometimes as you grow up and you are older, right? If you think about it, you wouldn't jump into an adventure when you are like, let's say, in your late 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s. But if you are like in your teens, maybe early 20s, it's like, hey, yeah, I want to go conquer the world. And so that is the energy that the page brings. And in particularly this page of wands. When we look at the page of swords, here we are invited to think in a different way. Okay, we are invited to think outside of the norm. And if we were to think about how this page connects with us, it would be that teenager that now is thinking in his own terms or her own terms, and is telling mom and dad, hey, no, 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 this is not who I am, okay? No, 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 no. I think I can think my own thoughts and I can make my own reality. So it is that challenging of like, hey, you've been in this plateau or you've been living with this way of thinking. And now you're giving like, I'm going to think for myself. I'm just going to own it and I'm going to think different. I'm going to make my own thoughts. And that's what that page of swords tell us. When we look at the cups, it is about connecting with the emotions. If I see this page of cups, I see like that first time that you fell in love, that first kiss, that first connection with emotion. Even when you were a child, you were like dreaming about what you wanted to be as an adult. But maybe as time progressed, you may have fallen into like, well, all my family are doctors, so maybe I'm not the artist. Or all my family are lawyers, or, you know, any kind of like rigid. And I'm like, well, I want to be an actress, but no. But when we are a page, we are thinking like, oh my God, yeah, I can be an actress. I can make it happen. I can follow my heart and my desire and go with that flow. So here is another invitation of connecting with those things that you love, those things that you enjoy, those things that make your heart like, you know, run faster in a way. And when we look at the page of pentacles, there's nothing wrong with earth element. If you know me, you know I'm a Virgo, so I'm an earth element. I'm very practical. Um, so this is mine. It's not as exciting as any of the other pages, but this one comes with the invitation of knowing what you're worth. Okay, it comes with the invitation of saying like, hey, remember, you are valuable. Like life is giving you an offer because you're worthy. You deserve it. You can manifest it. You can make it happen. So that's what this page is bringing to the world. Or it brings it first, like if we were to be looking at a reading, we may be seeing this page into like, okay, there is an opportunity. There is something that is happening. There is like, okay, an offer. Like, do you want to come, you know, work with us? Or do you want to like, you know, come to this party? There is like a very tangible offer that's happening. And when we look at the cards, we can see, again, what we were talking last week, right? Such a big difference between fire and air and water and earth in the way they hold the element. When we look at the page of wands holding the wand, or we see the page of swords holding the sword, it's quite different from the offering that's happening with the cups and the pentacles. It's like power, action, you know, more like I was saying in the past, masculine, but not in a way of gender. It's more like in a way of yin and yang. Okay. And then we have the cups being more like passive or feminine or offering or tending. It doesn't make them any like less strong or less energetic. It just makes the energy quite different when we cope with it. Okay. So this is what the pages are bringing. And as I said before, I think I've said it when we were doing readings, it's like when we look at these core cards, even though they may look like they have a gender, they are actually energy. Okay, so you can have a page being a woman or a man. You can have a knight being a woman or a man. You can have a king being a woman or a man. And the same happens with the queen. It's just a different kind of energy. Okay. So don't think about it, because when we go to the exercise, and I'm going to ask you to think about people in your life, I don't want you to put them in a rigid container, saying like, okay, because my Auntie Susan is a woman, she has to be a queen. No, maybe Auntie Susan, it's a page of wands because she loves adventure and she's always exploring. So don't put these cards into gender. If you can, just feel the energy. It's a very like new energy. It's a very like the new invitation when we see the pages is young. And as we move, we mature into the energy. So let's look at the knights now, which again, if we look, the first thing, and I would invite you to look at this or the cards that you have in front of you, and what can you see? Like, just from the first impression, you can see there's quite a different energy between, again, the wands and the swords and the cups and the pentacles. While the wands and the swords are just going into action. Like, I think the wands is more like, hey, I won the battle, I'm so happy. Sort of like a Leo energy in a way. If I were to think about a sign, I would be like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling good, I look good, I have my wand, I won the battle, like I look really fancy with my dress, and it's just like very like energetic, but still going forward. And the Knight of Swords would be more like going into the battle, going into like, oh, I'm gonna go, cut some heads off or something like that. But when we look at Cups and Pentacles again, it is a more peaceful, it's a more quiet, it is a more like an invitation to explore that element. It doesn't mean that there is no action, but it is a different kind of vibration. And you can see it even in the picture. If you see the colors, you really see the elements in the colors that you see in the cards. But when we look at the knights and going back to the timing and the energy, I would say this is a person that's like in the mid-20s till like the 40s. When you are in your prime time, you are trying to conquer the world, you are trying to make a name of yourself, have a family. It's just like that active period where you are like really making things happen. And that's what these nights invite us to. Like, how can you make things happen? So if you have an idea, you have an inspiration as the Knight of Wands, then what actions are you taking to make that inspiration into like an action and into something that's more like, physical, or something that you can bring into like manifestation? And when we look at the Knight of Swords, if you think about the page being like, okay, I think by myself, like it's okay, I have my own thoughts. Here you come into like, now there's confrontation, because maybe the way you're thinking is not the way the world is thinking, and now you have to defend your way of thinking, or you have to defend your boundaries, or you have to really be direct in the way you communicate to say, hey, no, This is like you're crossing a boundary here. So definitely that's what that energy of swords brings. It's like, okay, you're thinking and you have to sort of like execute the thoughts into being discerning and fighting for what you think is right, fighting for what you have, you know, made your beliefs in a way. And that's why we see like wands and swords are really like outgoing and, you know, more of like a fighting or action um, option and more active. Maybe active is the word. And if you look at their horses, you look at the physical that they are portraying, it does show more of like, you know, let's go to battle. When we look at the Knight of Cups, here is again an offer to come to your heart, like to connect with that heart energy. But they are not fighting. Even the horse is bowing down. Like, can you bow down to your feelings? Can you connect? Can you love yourself and love others? I think like this invites us to like maturing a little bit more of what the Page of Cups brings us, which is like that abundance of love in the cup with the fish coming out and prosperity and abundance and flow. Here comes like the next degree of that offering. And maybe here comes the offering of like, hey, let's be together. Let's make this a more of like an us instead of me and you. So here is that offering that's happening with this Knight of Cups. And when we look at the Knight of Pentacles, we may have seen the idea with the page of like, hey, you're valuable. And now you get the offer, because now that you know you're valuable, you receive the offer of the other saying, yeah, you are. And here is your offer. Here's like whatever you're looking. And it could be anything from physical to self-esteem or to self-value. So you can see it as like, okay, here comes the offer of like the job you want, or the salary you deserve, or the house you deserve, or the even could be a relationship that you deserve, because you may have been in relationships that were more motivated with emotions or fire, or like someone manipulating the way you were thinking, and now you are getting into something that's more like grounded and based on your values. So you'll see that. And like I said, this is like young but not so young. It's just like that time in life where you are working to make it to be a king or a queen, where you are really evolving and making your own life. You know, the page is the beginning. Here is like the interlude, and then when we get to the kings and the queens is when you get to like that conclusion, that really peak of the element. Okay. And so when we move to the kings and the queens, and I'm going through this to give you an idea of everything, and I'm going to come back to your questions. I'm going to come back to asking you how you feel about these different cards, and if you see them in a different way as well. But I just want to make sure that we get all this in, and then we can go into the questions. So like I said in the beginning, the kings and the queens, they are not really gender basic. Okay, a queen is more of like that feminine energy. Okay, and the king is more of like the masculine energy when we see it as yin and yang. Okay, so when we look at these queens, we see the element, we see what's happening, and we begin with the Queen of Wands. And when we look at her, if you look at all of them as a whole, you still see some of the differences, okay? you see here the Queen of Wands is the only one that's sitting straight up. All of them are sort of like on the side, if you were to look at that. And that gives you something. That gives you the idea that she's facing life as it comes, okay? She's facing situations and she owns her power. She owns her ability to like be creative and inspire and put her creativity into action. If you've had a reading with me, you know that I describe the Queen of Wands as the female magician. You can see the black cat, you see the wand, she's in her power. She's taking ownership of what's happening. She takes responsibility on her life. So she's like really sitting in her power, in her fiery power. Okay. And remember, fire can cook a steak or can burn a house. So however you use the energy is going to determine how you manifest it. But this one seems to be very grounded, like controlling her energy to make sure that her reality matches her vision. Okay. When we look at the Queen of Swords, she's already looking at the side. So she's not facing straight. And we can see this as something like being very like impersonal, like she's making the decisions based on facts and not really like connecting with the other, not connecting with the situation. She has her sword like up and a hand sort of like, okay, I'm going to determine whether I help you or I cut your head off. And this is a person that has her mind really under control. Like she is very impersonal. She is very like detached. But because she is detached, she can think very clearly and she's not going to be subjective about something. She's going to be very objective, and that's why she has a sword, because she's not going to hesitate. And she's not going to hesitate whether to give you a hand or to cut your head off, depending on the facts. She's going to be very practical in that realm. So when we look at her, in a certain way, she has a little bit of a feeling of that justice, or like she's imparting some discernment. And I think that is one of the words that I would attach to this card, is that of like, okay, you need to discern whether this is good or bad, whether you keep going or you cut it off. Like, but based on your strategy, based on your vision of life, based on the way you think. Okay. So that is what this queen is talking about. And then we move to the more like nurturing queens, not so action oriented, but still very powerful. Because when we have this Queen of Cups, we have the Queen of the Heart. But again, remember that her element is the element of water. It is the emotions. So when we look at emotions, we can have a very calm sea, or we can have a tsunami. Okay, and that is the same with this queen. Like if this queen gets very emotional, she may be ruled by like drama and emotion, and leave that element to the exponent of being not very healthy. Okay, so when we see the Queen of Cups, we can say, hey, you know, you can connect with your emotions. Maybe you are a little bit of like detached with how you're feeling, or maybe you're feeling too much, and you have to make sure that your emotions are not clouding the way you think. So maybe you have to like embrace more this Queen of Swords instead of like really like be so much in your emotions. Okay, so we will see, and in a reading it will depend on the cards that come around it. But that is the two sides, right? And everyone has these two sides. Like I said with the Queen of Wands, it's like the fire can cook a steak or can burn a house. So there's always that kind of like, okay, the Queen of Swords can give you a hand or cut your head off. When we look at the Queen of Pentacles, here is where we see a person that is very abundant, a person that is very like prosperous. She is like, she has everything in the material realm that she needs. She has everything that she may desire. But if we were to think about this that I'm saying to you, like, is there a negative side or a more challenging side? I would say like the Queen of Pentacles may have no fire. The Queen of Pentacles may be bored about like, well, she has everything she needs. She feels safe, she's grounded, she has all the material things she wants, but maybe she needs a little bit of that fire to create the spark again. Or maybe she needs a little bit of the emotions to feel again because now she got too comfortable. So we can see it in that way. And if you were to observe the cards, also again, you see the Wands and the Swords looking up, like really looking at the world. And you see the Cups and the Pentacles sort of like not looking down, but really observing the element, really going within. So if I were to think about them, I would say like, you know, the Queen of Wands and the Queen of Swords are more outgoing, and the Queen of Cups and the Queen of Pentacles are more inward, like really connecting with what's happening within. And that is like, and there are so many symbols and so many things that we could observe on these cards that I would invite you this week also to go back and look at your cards and see what you see as well. Because I'm just scratching, you know, the surface with what I'm mentioning to you. And when we finally see the Kings, and if you have the time and you can see, I would invite you to look at the Kings and the Queens for the same suit, because you will see whether they are looking at each other, they're looking away, they are just looking front, or some look front while the other one looks away. It is another good exercise to do, to observe how the Kings and the Queens work together, because they do complement each other. Okay, well, the Queen is more of like the feminine principle. The King is the masculine. The King is the active principle. The King, if we were to look at as growing, okay, and I think some decks have mentioned it, where you have the Page as the beginning, the Knight as the central time. Then you would have the Queen as, you know, acquiring most of the knowledge of the element, and the King would be what they used to call the sages or the elder, because when we look at them, they come in that order. So it's like the 10 in a major, in a minor arcana. So you can see it that way too. But the King and the Queen complement each other. So I would invite you to look at them together. And here again, the first reaction that comes when we look at them, it's like the King of Wands is looking totally at the side, is totally looking at his wand. The others are looking sort of like front, but again, we do have the Cups and the Pentacles looking at the little bit of a side. The only one that's really frontal is that a King of Swords. And if you remember from the Queens, it was the Queen of Wands that was looking at the front. Okay, it wasn't the Queen of Swords that was looking right side up. So that could give you a clue of like, okay, how do you approach life? And here you can see it in the physical connection of like, how are they looking? I'm not saying that the King of Wands is avoiding, but if we were to think about this King of Wands, he's very happy with who he is. If he had like an energy, I would say like it's like a Leo, like he's looking at his wand and he's proud of it, like very proud of what he has accomplished, very charismatic person, very charming, like very motivating. He's a fiery king, so he can spark inspiration in you. He can charm you. He can be like that. I don't know, coach or motivation, like it's like pushing you, cheerleading you. So you can see that, but the bad side of it is like he may need that fire all the time. So he may be a little bit of like, okay, I'm going to look at the fire here and here and here, and not really connecting with one person. So if you were to think about the Queen of Wands was like looking front and facing life and really on her power, he's looking around and saying like, is there another queen that I can go check out? Okay, while she does the work. So again, there is that energy when we see the King of Wands, and very different for the Queen of Swords, the King of Swords, I mean. Here is where we have a person that has the strategy, right? Has the agenda, but he is a poker face. You never know how he's feeling, what he's thinking. He's just like there, ready to execute his vision without giving you, and very impersonal. That is one of the characteristics that he holds with his Queen of Swords, where both are very impersonal, both are very detached. While the Queen is just thinking how to execute and maybe that discernment, the King is playing like he's playing chess and moving his pieces the way to get to checkmate. Okay, so that is the part, like it's a very different energy from this King of Wands. That's more like, okay, charismatic. This one is more like, okay, the lawyer, or you know, the finance person that's playing the market, and you cannot really see what's happening, but they are playing the pieces to make sure that they get the game. Okay, and then when we look at the cups, we see that a King of the Heart, we see someone that is very connected with his emotions. Many times we see the soulmate here. We see a person that's, again, connecting with their emotions. So we may see a man that is not afraid to cry, a man that's not afraid to show his emotions. Or it could be a woman that's more masculine and still not afraid to show emotions. Like I want to make sure that I repeat this, because I don't want you to put this in containers of like kings have to be men and queens have to be women. It could be different. It's not really binary with tarot. And so this man could be someone that his emotions, the same as the Queen of Cups, may cloud how he's like thinking. Maybe someone that has a lot of drama around him, and when you meet this person, it's like, okay, man, everything happens to you. Why everything happens to you? Everything is very emotional. So you could find that with the King of Cups, okay? Or over dramatic, someone that's like, oh my God, like, you know, drowning himself in a glass of water. Just like when we take this water element to the extreme, we can see some drama happening there. And finally, with the King of Pentacles, here's where we see the grounding, like the sort of like the top of the mountain where you were to be achieving this earth element, this manifestation. But like I said, with the Queen of Pentacles, I say the same with the King. Someone very stable, someone very grounded, someone that has everything on paper that you may want. You know, they have the house, the boat, the cabin in the mountains, and the, you know, house on the beach. They have everything materially, but there may be the element of like not that much fun. Is the person that, okay, I have everything, so I'm settled. And he may need a little bit of that fire to spark more of like, you know, the fire within, or some of the emotion, because it could be boring at times. It could be like, okay, I have everything, but let's watch TV and have some good dinner, and just that's it. No adventure, no no game, no emotion. Just, hey, good food, some TV, and that's good. And for some people that works well, but for some others, they need more action. So again, it's like I've given a little bit of like what my take is on them. So I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see you. And I'm going to open it up to ask you, like, if anything has come up for you, if you want to share anything that maybe you agree or disagree, or you see these cards differently. You can open your microphone on the bottom left.
Hey, Carolina, Marcia. So I just wanted to share that looking at the cards, because I'm trying to do that and see what comes to my mind right away. So for the King of Pentacles, the first thing that came to my mind is that he looks content. That's what comes to me right away. And from what you mentioned, maybe he can be a little boring because he's already got everything. But the first thing I'm looking is content, you know. So maybe depending on the question, the context of a question when I'm doing a reading, right? It could be one or the other.
Yeah, and definitely, like, I had many times like people coming with, let's say I'm doing a reading and the person is asking for a relationship, or they want a relationship, and both, you know, the King of Swords comes in, or the King of Wands comes in, and then it comes the King of Pentacles. And there you see, right? It's like, maybe are you wanting to go for the bad boy, or do you want to go with someone more stable that will value you?
Right,
So
exactly.
you will see it in different like shades. So it definitely depends on the surrounding, and also on the type of question. But content is good. Like, it's a person that has everything. The only issue is like, if you do have everything, there is no more room to grow. So it gets to a point where like human beings don't like that stagnation for too long. Okay. Anybody else?
I'm not sure if I have all the words to like fully articulate these thoughts, but I wanted to say that the way that you presented this really made me think about the entire tarot deck in a new way, because I see the balance in it. Like, there's so much balance between each card and each element, and the way that they play off of one another makes things like whole and complete. And so I just feel like that brings a lot of richness that might have been missing from before from what I was doing. So I'm actually super grateful. Thank you. It was brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, and I feel like that's the part that we can also work with when we work with the core cards, right? Or when you work with the tarot. But like, if you were to imagine yourself like, okay, you know, I'm on this project, and how do I feel? Well, I feel like, you know, a page of wands, because I just have the idea. So what do you do to make it happen? What do you do? Like, what do you need to make it, maybe to that Queen of Pentacles that has the manifestation? or, you know, that King of Pentacles that have that contentment. The same happens like if you are one of the queens or you are one of the kings, like what element are you missing that maybe you need to incorporate because you've been having too much of one thing could be not very positive. So if you are too earthy, or if you are too watery or too fiery, maybe you need to bring back the energy of some of the other core cards, some of the other elements. So definitely something to take into account. I mentioned, I think in one of the first sessions when we were talking about readings, some people, some readers like to separate the core cards. And if they have a reading with a man, they would have the kings separated and have them shuffle just the kings alone first and pick one. And that would be coming like their significator or how they are coming to the reading. The same would happen if the person is a woman, and they would do that with the queens. And so you, from that point, you see like, okay, this person comes as the queen of like swords. Okay, this person is really like thinking a lot. Maybe they are just trying to make sense of what's happening to them. They are very much in their mind. Maybe their mind is playing them tricks and they need to have that under control. But you can see a little bit of a flavor of how they are coming. I don't do that, but I know that many readers do that. So that's something that you can do if you want to experience that. You could have the queens separated and like once a week shuffle the queens and say, well, which one is the queen that's going to be ruling my week? Okay. And so you pick one and you're like, okay, I'm supposed to be the Queen of Pentacles. So, hey, I'm supposed to be grounded. I'm going to be incorporating a lot of energy on like keeping myself centered, keeping myself like taking care of my needs, like making things practical. But maybe you get like the Queen of Cups. And at that point, it's like, okay, maybe you need to feel a little bit more of the emotions, or it's gonna be a very emotional week. So you need to make sure that you don't allow this tsunami to wash off everything in your house, you know? Like, okay, I know this is going to be a week that's gonna challenge me in my emotions, so I'm going to be prepared. Or if you are very detached and very like, okay, very structured, very grounded, maybe you need to connect more or less like, hey, what do I love doing? What makes me feel good? What makes me happy? What connects with my heart? Like, do I dance? Do I draw? Do I color? Do I play with my kids? What do I do to connect with that heart energy? So you could do that if you want. But the exercise that I wanted to do today, and we have like about 8 minutes, so we are good in time, unless you have questions. So I would invite you to think about 3 people in your life, people where you have a connection with them, whether maybe think about one person you get along really good, and maybe 2 people that you don't get along, or they trigger you, or they push your buttons. And as you write their names down in your journal, I'm not going to ask you to share this, I'm just going to ask you to share the exercise and like, how are you feeling about it? Look at each name and look at all these core cards, and can you assign one of these core cards to them? Let's say you have someone that's very like childish and has a temper, and so, well, maybe you do pick that page of wands, because hey, it's adventures, but hey, it's fiery, and fiery could be temper, could be oriented into like blowing up. And childish is more of like a page energy instead of like a knight or a king or a queen. So just take a couple of minutes and look at your cards and look at these people, maybe do it with one and take the other two for later in the week. But just like start thinking like, how can I put people with these core card personalities? So then the way this helps you is like when you are doing readings for yourself, this person may come up and then you know that the reading is related to them. Or you could use that if you were doing a reading for that person and make it the significator in your reading to call their energy if you don't have the person in front of you. And at this time, most of us, we don't have the people in front of us to do the readings. Two to 3 minutes. Okay, so as you, at least one person or how many you have, if you don't mind, if anybody wants to share how they felt about assigning personalities to people you know, or if you've done that in the past. Some people may have done it if you've been doing tarot for a while. Okay. Nobody. It's okay. It's okay. It's a shy crowd, which is fine. Just make sure that you use this kind of energy in the week going forward, because you can pick some people even in your family or some close people that you have contact very regularly, and maybe you are not able to see in person right now. Like I use this kind of technique for people that live in Argentina. Some of my family members, when they ask me for a reading, I would make sure that I pick that card that I identify them with, as like I'm calling their energy into this reading. And I use that as my significator, and then I pick the other cards. So you can do that. I also invite you to do the picking a queen or a king for the week and see how that works for you. How can you work the elements, during that week, and see what you pay attention, like what you notice. Maybe if you pick, like, let's say the Queen of Swords, maybe that week you are challenged with being very, like, impartial and making decisions and discerning what you want to do and how you're gonna do it. So I would invite you to play with that. And now that we have seen the whole deck, now you can play with the whole deck as you're doing your weekly readings or your daily readings. You don't need to stick with the major arcana or core cards or minor arcana. you can put them all together and start picking your cards for the day or your cards for the week and practice. Like I've said before, practice makes perfect. And the more you get acquainted with your cards, the better they are going to work for you. Next week is going to be a very interesting week because our book talks about permutations. And permutations are picking a set of cards, reading them, and then shuffling them around. So like you can move them, clockwise or counterclockwise. And how would it be if this is the past and this is the future instead of this is, the vice versa. So we will be playing with that. I think the way I'm gonna do is like I'm going to still stick with this PowerPoint and have like a couple of layouts with the permutations. So you can see how they work, and I will give you like my insights, and then we'll have one exercise to practice those permutations. I don't think we're gonna do the Celtic cross permutation, but maybe we will do like a 4-card or a 5-card permutation where we are shifting them and moving them around. But please read the book. There's many exercises in that chapter. We are not going to do all of them. We'll do one, and I'll have a couple to show you how permutations work. So you can use it if you feel that's something that you want to explore. Okay.
Carolina,
So, yes.
for the week, for us to practice, now that we got to know all the cards, how many cards do you advise?
I would do 3 cards max a
Okay.
day, if you are doing a day.
That's good.
Okay. And yeah, and I will see you next week for permutations. If you want to join me on Sunday, I'm gonna be doing the astrology class for the transpersonal planets. So we are going to be talking about Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. So I will see you, and it is Sunday at 5 p.m. Hopefully there's no issues with the timing. I will be recording the class too, because last time many people missed the Saturn class, and they were very upset about it.
So,
Yes, Roberta.
Carolina, what is the chapter for the permutations?
I think it's chapter number 6.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I know which book are you guys reading right now?
We are reading this Tarot for Yourself by Mary Greer.
No. Oh, I don't have but I have a modern tarot book, ebook.
Okay, yeah, you can use the ebook, just like it is that, and there's many different versions. There's a newer version now, but there's like plenty of versions of this.
So this the book is called Tarot
For Yourself.
for Yourself.
Yeah.
Tarot for Yourself. For Yourself.
Really